Well, we decided to do a second podcast on misogyny, but we've enlarged it a little to bring in some other points of discussion of racism and the gender gap. And also this time really pointing out that this is a really difficult time for men as well as women. And ultimately, it does seem that one candidate here in the election coming up very soon is giving us hope. Enjoy it. But what do I know? I'm just a vagina doctor. Gabriella Taylor, it's great to see you back on the Vagina Doctor podcast. And it is right back because we were talking just last week. And our subject then, as is now, misogyny. There are a few things that we wanted to expand on but basically really try to emphasize how serious this is, what can be done about it, why it happened, and that type of thing. Last week, we were looking at the damaging effects of misogyny in the 2016 election and the damage that it did to one side. The same thing is happening to Kamala Harris, as happened to Hillary Clinton. But it's worse now because we have another reason for people to hate her. Racism.
And there's so much more at stake now for women like me and your daughters and your partner. And so, yes, I would say it's so much more worse because the amplification, the effects of amplified misogyny right now are far-reaching to affect every single female in America. So it's not just one token woman that's being targeted.
Right.
It's all of us as a collective.
And in fact, the sexes have separated significantly this time,
tragically.
more than ever. There's this gender gap that is splitting the country.
Yes.
There's another factor that's thrown in here that I've never before this really thought of, which is the bro factor. The young man just say feeling forgotten and left alone, young man that see a hope in Trump of being able and following him.
Yes.
And we will go into that a little more. But let's go back briefly to the origins of misogyny. Because this is your area of expertise, and let our listeners know.
Well, I think of misogyny as an outpicturing of what we call the patriarchy, which is really a masculine dominant orientation to power that we've been existing within and under for thousands of years now. And so as a result of this power over, power under paradigm, that has also resulted in the erosion of feminine power. And when I say feminine power, there's a polarity inside every single one of us humans. There's feminine energy and masculine energy. The masculine energy is more overtly directive and has an ability to push or force, you think of the incredible capacity to build things and to direct things and to be organized and methodical and follow a recipe. These are all masculine capacities to really follow a linear line, straight to finish. And then feminine energy is much more about connection and creativity and compassion and sense of empathy with other. And so every single one of us we all have masculine and feminine energies. However, the patriarchal culture for thousands of years now has really diminished our humanity, which typically is more feminine energies. So as we've developed this, as we've lost our way, lost our sense of connection and awareness of our sense of belonging with other, I see how misogyny is one of the outpicturings, one of the many tragic outpicturings, which is this hatred of women and the hatred of the feminine, and also the fear of the feminine, and then the adamant, not only desire, but attempts to control and diminish the feminine because of this hatred. But I don't think it started with hatred. I think hatred it's a response to this core disconnection from our shared humanity.
But I mean, why was it even necessary to do this in the first place? I
Oh
mean,
God,
was it
that's a great question. I mean,
okay, were we ever without it? I guess that's...
From what I understand, there was a period on this planet for around 50,000 years, which is no small, chunk of change in terms of time. Certain historians will say 30,000 years, 45,000 years. So somewhere, tens of thousands of years where we existed as a matriarchal culture. And it wasn't a power over like a hierarchy in terms of matriarchy, patriarchy as a hierarchy, where we lived in relationship to one another and with one another and with the planet, the sky, the crops. We lived we had a relationship with Mother Earth, and how from what I understand, how they've deduced that this was a peaceful, egalitarian way of being is that through the artifacts, through the cave paintings, through the ways that stories were told through time, there were no instances or stories of war, of weaponry, or stories that depicted the separation. So from what I understand, there was a period in time where we coexisted together in peace for up to 50,000 years. So I believe that each one of us holds some resonance with that possibility. It just might be really buried. And so I do think that we have an opportunity to find our way in a new way with the technological intelligence that we have. Back then, we didn't have that. And in a way where we can really support one another and find our way back into connection with ourselves, each other, the planet.
Yeah. So what is this? What has misogyny done to our society? I mean, it's one of a number of bad events, bad tendencies that come out of human nature.
It's tragic. It's a tragedy that we've adapted to.
Yeah.
I mean, when we think of it, the definition is hatred of women.
Yes.
And so that's tragic because we need women and we need men equally. And so when there is an overactive hatred of half of us.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's a tragedy in terms of what that causes people to do and what it's like to be on the receiving end of it. And there's no way we'll ever win with this rampant because someone always suffers.
Right.
The men that are casting stones at women, metaphorically and realistically, suffer. And the women that are being undermined, whether it's overtly beaten or overtly held back or subversively, it's so rampant throughout our culture, are suffering.
Yeah. In talking to teenagers, young women, they have a problem with the other gender of the same age. Mm-hmm. And if they don't engage, if the guy wants to hang out or have a relationship, if the girl is not prepared to do that, the guys just get angry and they're very mean.
Yeah. And we have to remember that mad is sad's bodyguard.
Okay.
Like, we have a lot to be mad about. We have a lot to be angry about, all of us.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, we are in this together, and we live in a culture that promotes blame and shame. Blame to cover up the shame of feeling not enough. Like, it's your fault because I feel bad. So there's this blame and shame, but underneath it, every single one of us are hurting, whether we agree or not, whether we know it or not. And to the degree that we are angry or being destructive or choosing hatred or divisiveness or bullying, that's all anger. That's rage. And underneath rage is deep grief around that which was lacking. Deep grief around the inability to have been cared for, perhaps in the way that we needed to early on or up until now.
Going off a little tangentially here, do you agree that anger is a secondary emotion? It's always a cause?
I don't see it as that. I see anger anger is fundamentally, it's a core emotion that we all have and need to find healthy expressions of. Mm-hmm. Often, and particularly in our culture, because men have been shamed for expressing sorrow or more tender feelings, it's easier to default to anger because it's more publicly accepted. So I'm not so sure if I see it in a ranking way where it's secondary. I see it more as it's societally acceptable to be an angry man versus a tearful man.
That's a shame.
I mean, it really is. Here's the shame and blame, right? Men are blamed for being soft or, being a pussy or all these pejoratives that come in if men are actually expressing the sorrow and the heartbreak. But when we see these like aggressive, spiteful men in the media, I mean, behind that is a broken heart and a very young little boy inside that is running the show. That nobody taught him how to like use his words around emotional languaging. Nobody taught him how to actually feel his feelings and know that he can regulate himself with his feelings. Nobody taught him that he matters. So then we see these big bullies with a lot of power, a lot of money, a lot of ammunition, a lot of media coverage. And really, they are sad little boys that are hiding behind the mad because that's more okay.
So for women to deal with that situation, they need to be empowered.
It is crucial we find our voices and stop settling for and tolerating the mistreatment in our homes, from our fathers, from our siblings, from our husbands, from our sons.
Yeah.
It is crucial. And I mean, I have been in the industry of largely working with women for almost 27 years now, and I've worked with a lot of men and still have some male clients, but largely female-based. It's like the level of all of that to say, I have seen behind the scenes in hundreds into thousands of women's lives, and that which she silently suffers and tolerates behind the scenes, whether it's the men in her family or in the workplace, is not okay. It's not okay for so many of us. And so, and I'm not at all on the page of like, oh, the men are bad or wrong, or we need to like override the men and take our power back. And, it's not that, but from a place of strength and that strength of heart, it's like that fierce mama bear where it's like, I know that I have led you to believe that it's okay for you to speak to me this way, but it's not anymore. So when you raise your voice at me or when you try to control me, I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to stand up and walk away because I care about you and I care about me, and this isn't okay anymore. We need to start having these conversations with our men who only learned, because of the patriarchal culture that we live in, that to have a temper tantrum or to lash out or to give us the silent treatment is the way to keep us in line. And so we both need to learn how to find a new way to talk about hard things in a safe way.
And that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do a second podcast on the same subject.
Yeah.
Is really to look at it from the male point of view.
Yes.
And we'll get it to that in a moment, because I came through talking last time as a gynecologist, but also as a father and a brother, a grandfather, and looking after women professionally most of my life. And I got some flack for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
and we'll go into that in a minute.
Yeah.
Because I also have 4 sons, and they let me know their opinion. But we'll go into that a little more. Looking at this, we're November 1st tomorrow, very close to an election.
Yes.
What are the potential consequences for Donald Trump winning this election relative to women?
Far-reaching. Everything from not only the arresting women's abilities to get the reproductive health care that we choose from a place of autonomy and choice over our bodies, but it's also stripping women of certain civil autonomies where we can participate in society in the way that we deserve to and need to. So there are far-reaching consequences of imposing control over our bodies and our health care and our rights to health care. Everything from that to having a person in office who tends to demonstrate very reactive, irrational, emotional dysregulation. It seems like he just doesn't have an ability to regulate his emotions. And I mean, that's tricky enough to be in relationship with someone like that can't regulate themselves emotionally, let alone a world leader. So that to me is very alarming in terms of that reactive nature. The promotion of bullying and the promotion of hatred, the promotion of destructive behavior is terrifying to me. So the consequences of that, of roiling up the subconscious, the unresolved subconscious of the collective in our country, of people's rage and grief that comes out in very destructive ways, this is terrifying. Looking at how he tends to, there's a level of idolatry with previous figures such as Hitler that he seems to look up to and be very, very intrigued by how they dominated things. I mean, that is so alarming. Mm-hmm. The allegations of sexual mistreatment of women, I mean, unbelievably terrifying. So, I mean, I'm using the word terrifying a lot here, and at the risk of sounding melodramatic, I think we actually need to look at what is at stake, because there's a lot of terror at stake, whether it's inciting civil unrests, whether it's an ongoing erosion of our liberties, you know, as Americans, whether it is a modern day domination of feminine power through feminine's bodies. There's a lot that's at stake. And look, I mean, I don't think there's a great candidate either way. I'm definitely voting for Harris because she's standing on the side of the light as far as I'm concerned, given the options, but it's a broken system. But given the options, she's standing on the side of something that is life affirming and that we can work with and build from. To me, he's standing on the side of setting us back in some very dangerous ways that could be terrifying for me, you, and every single one of us, particularly women, and particularly women of color.
And what do you think of the statement he made today that first day in office, if he wins, he's going to protect women whether they like it or not?
I mean, there it is. That is, I'm going to use the word terrifying again. That is terrifying. It's almost like the second part cancels out the first part.
Yes, completely.
The whether we like it or not. There's this dominance on women that is, to me, we need to really, no matter what our personal feelings are about the candidates, I think we really need to take a moment and reflect on what kind of world are we wanting to create for ourselves if we're women, for our daughters, for our wives, our girlfriends, our sisters, because this has far-reaching negative consequences for us women, let alone all sorts of other populations and areas.
Well, taking up from that statement, how will it adversely affect males?
I think it'll reinforce the untended. There is a deep healing opportunity that sits within the male psyche and the feminine psyche. And it will deepen the gap that drives men towards unhealthy, destructive tendencies were he to come into office. It would give a level of permission.
Permission was the word I was just on the tip of my tongue.
Permission to be rageful, to be vengeful, to be reactive. It'll give permission to deepen the divide that men suffer greatly. I mean, this is not about are men good or women good. It's like we're all fundamentally good as humans. And it will, to me, it's tragic because it'll reinforce the very illness in our culture that we need to mend, which is how much we've lost our way and our natural sense of kindness as humans.
I mentioned right at the beginning the gender gap, and I was interested to get some figures. There was an NBC poll in the last month or so, looking at the percentage of males that were voting for Trump and those who were voting for Harris. And basically 52% of males were voting for Trump and 40% were voting for Harris. Flip side, the women, females, were 58% for Harris and 37% for Trump. That's a gap of 33.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a huge chasm there of difference just on the basis of gender.
Yeah.
In fact, the same study showed that if you looked at Gen Z voters in battleground states, that gap was not 33, it was 51.
Mm.
So just a even greater divide where they feel they just want to stick with their own sex. And it's strange to me that it's actually not even more so because there is such a male-female divide here.
And just to comment on that, the it still blows my mind how many women are voting in the direction of Trump.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, I think that also speaks to how many women have normalized mistreatment. And that is something that is a very significant thing that must be reckoned with in terms of good-hearted, educated women that think that it's okay for men to bully or to control or dominate because they've grown up so used to it. So I think that's really a call to action for us women to get the support that we need to discover, like, oh, wait, we don't have to settle for this anymore.
Right.
We deserve respect. We deserve to be cared for. We deserve to feel safe in our bodies and in our homes and in our workplaces without fear of retaliation or backlash.
When you look at the important choices or goals that women have and men have, they're very significantly different. And there's really, in the same study, they were talking about young women worldwide are concerned regarding sexual harassment, domestic violence, child abuse, mental health. Young men are focused on competition, bravery, and honor. Okay? Those things don't work very well together.
No.
There's a strong conviction also of the young men that as they have found themselves less privileged with time, which they are because jobs are difficult to find and so on, that they blame women for it. It's not the women's fault.
No.
And that if you talk to those men, they almost all will blame women for this.
And again, it's a culture of blame and shame. It's so much easier to put it on you, you being whomever the you is, than actually take a good look at, where am I in all of this?
There are many historical examples of nations that have a large population of young men idle without purpose. And crime and wars and fighting and frustration.
And what you're speaking of, I think, is really deserves to be underscored. We have lost our way and a sense of purpose around why am I even here? I work a lot with whether it's people that have a lot of worldly power, whether they're Grammy Award-winning musicians or they are significant ultra-high net worth individuals that manage phenomenal portfolios that really have a lot of financial power, or people that are in big leadership positions. Like this seems to be who makes up my office. And I was speaking with one of my clients today who is a 6-time Grammy Award-winning musician, and it's actually a man, and he's lamenting, when will it ever be enough? When will I ever feel satisfied and not think I have to claw my way to the top and trample on whoever is behind me, underneath me. Yeah. And it's beautiful that he has the self-awareness and that we're even working together, because here he is at the top of the throne in a lot of ways in terms of fame, financial abundance, creative fulfillment, yet he has no sense of purpose, like the deeper purpose around underneath acquiring things. And the fact that he's looking at this and looking at, I could die tomorrow. What is it that gives me a sense of purpose and fulfillment? I've got a 3-year-old girl. I've got a wife. What is it that will give me a sense of oh, I'm enough? and that my life is enough and that I'm connected to something bigger than myself. That yearning for purpose is so necessary to connect with.
So how do we get that message across? How do we show people what they need? How do we solve the problem of the men's dissatisfaction?
I think the first place is we have to stop making each other wrong and making ourselves wrong, because to the degree that we are reinforcing this idea that you're the enemy, the blame cycle, then we're not going to get anywhere. And our nervous systems are so wired to be in relationship with each other. Like, our nervous systems require a sense of connection and safety. And when we don't have that, we're in trouble. The messages in our brain are in trouble. The physiological responses in terms of our hormone production and neurotransmitters and how it really clouds our perspective around things. When we feel disconnected from other, we suffer greatly. So I think part of this is recognizing that there's no one to blame. There's no one to make wrong. There's a deeper systemic cultural bias that we've all drank the Kool-Aid, which is one that erodes our humanity and dismisses and diminishes our humanity and the erosion of feminine power. So just like culture is to humans what water is to fish, as it's been said, I think the first point is even the awareness of, oh my gosh, how am I reinforcing these cultural narratives and ideals that are causing me to undermine myself and undermine you? And then from there, how can we do things differently? Because to the degree that we're walking around in this trance, thinking that you're wrong or you're the problem or I'm the problem, there's something wrong with me, we're just going to keep spinning. And so I think the way out is starting to look at, oh, is this even true? The things that I'm thinking, the things that I'm believing, this war that I'm fighting with myself or my neighbor or on the global stage, is this really the way?
Really just coming to terms with that reality of where we are and how we're failing at this time. What we need is actually what Harris is promising, which is hope.
She is modeling a possibility of hope. Yeah. Yes, that is not built on destructive, violent outbursts and stripping people of power and civil liberties.
And a number of the things, I mean, she's been criticized, and everybody can be criticized, as we said, of not having a more distinct agenda, although I think she's actually been fairly vocal about what she's trying to do. But some of the things that I think are really helpful for couples, for men and women living together, it's a lot of it's about jobs. And a lot of the manual labor jobs have gone overseas or otherwise. There's automation now, so that some of those manual labor, the jobs that did not require a college degree to get into, and promoting that whole idea of trying to create more jobs like that, and pushing the whole idea, and it's an old idea, of apprenticeships, of an expert in something, or at least somebody who's good at something, being able to teach somebody else, a student, and have them with them, and show them, pass on the skills, the knowledge, and it creates more jobs that way, and gives hope and a purpose.
And I think it also gives a sense of you matter.
Yes.
Underneath all of this,
right.
It's a sense of you matter enough that I'm going to teach you this craft. And so it forges relationships, it forges connection, it forges bonds. And these things matter terrifically.
The other thing that I think is tremendous in her of her ideas is this $25,000 down payment assistance for a first-time house buyer. I mean, getting a house, I mean, you're not really established until you have sort of a piece of the pie, you've got a foothold, and coming up with saving money is very difficult. But that help, I think, it's all, her ideas are all in this right direction, it seems to me, rather than the horror and the garbage the garbage pile that Trump chooses to call
I just sort
America.
of think of it that it's either we're moving in a direction of destruction,
Mm-hmm.
a dismantling of, or we're moving in a direction of creativity and expansion and possibility. It's sort of just a paradox of life. And whether her specific things people agree with or not, that's completely fine. I have my own questions. However, she's moving in a direction of creativity and possibility, and he's moving in the direction of destruction. And to me, that matters.
I was reading an article from the Guardian newspaper in London, and it was referred to as the headline was "The Big Lie," and the journalist there was basically saying that he's never ever been aware of a situation on the planet where a leading contender for the prize of prime ministership or a president or whatever was based on a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And because if you look at the economy, Trump is saying it's crap, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's the U.S. America is doing really well economically.
Mm-hmm.
It's been the fastest recovery from COVID than any other civilized country. The stock market is at record levels.
Mm-hmm.
Inflation is down. Joblessness is down. It's just ridiculous. And I think that, I just look at the lies that come out and I think, well, wait a minute. You know those lies, but does he? Do they? If you hear the lie enough, you believe it.
Yeah.
And it's just so ridiculous.
Yes. And I think what's dangerous about this is that there are these very deliberate psychological warfare tactics being utilized to incite and promote fear in people. And I think we spoke about this last week around, he speaks very, very specifically in limbic language, which is the language that a 5-year-old would use around, I hate you, give me more of that, get out of my way. Very simple commands that are very emotionally heated and very unilaterally do what I want, get out of my, you get the idea.
Yeah.
And so limbic language, particularly as it's relating to what you're saying, I mean, I think the reality is we're facing a big case of the emperor is not wearing any clothes.
Favorite story.
I mean, it's like the emperor's not wearing any clothes. So no matter what the soundbite is, whether it's like the economy is collapsing or sound bites, no matter what they are, he's using psychological warfare to do what? To promote fear and compliance. Go with me. I'll keep you safe from those enemies. And that is what is very dangerous about this, because he's speaking directly to the subcortical brain in where our limbic system is held. And we're walking around, each one of us, with a lot of fear inside as it is, because it's wired into being human. We're walking around with a lot of anger inside because of many of the things that we've been talking about. And we're walking around with a lot of grief inside. And none of us feel settled. None of us feel a sense of certainty. So we're reaching for the defense strategies that we've learned, which is either to fight back or to run away or to collapse around it. So to me, the fact that he's so deliberately using psychological warfare, and the reason why I'm confident about this is that I'm doing work within the White House and the White House administration right now, and there's actually a whole team that is dedicated to the recognition of how psychological warfare is being utilized and how dangerous it is for enrolling millions of people in the direction of aggression. And this is what we need to be very aware of. If he's saying things that are touching a place inside that are causing me want to do something to you or to not care about you or attack you or anything inside that's promoting divisiveness, we've bought in.
Yeah.
Like the spell has been cast on us. And for us to have that sense of volition inside to recognize no matter what, if he's promoting a sense of againstness, then we're in trouble. We are in trouble.
And that is honestly, to me, the point of this podcast is just making people aware of how subversive This
is a very dangerous, slippery slope that we're on right now.
It really is. And,
Yeah.
and it's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. I mean, hence that's the word that's come out. And I don't use that word that often, but I've been noticing it's really present because there is so much at stake right now. And we have the power to turn this around. We really do.
I hope so.
I hope so as well.
Well, I think Kamala does give us hope. It really does.
Yeah.
And you've put it so eloquently again, and really appreciate everything that you say and you do. And thanks for coming on the podcast again.
My pleasure.
Great.
Yeah.
We
and
need
here's to possibilities
that
bring more love and kindness back together.
Teamwork.
Teamwork. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Yes.
Well, thanks for listening. We're getting really good feedback. We'd really appreciate a review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Thank you. You can always DM the Vagina Doctor Instagram with any questions or topics you'd like to learn more about, or email us. The Vagina Doctor Podcast. It all starts here.